Michelle Bouffard and Michaela Morris are partners in crime at House Wine. You'll know them as House Wine Girls.
We're not going to get in the middle of David and Sid. We're leaving BC behind, sort of, just for a little bit.
Yeah, the topic didn't have to be BC, so we don't feel like we're cheating, right? My name is Michelle, this is Michaela, and together we've co-owned a company now for about 10 years, about 15 years. And besides wearing red dresses, we do a lot of other things. I think when we first started to develop the concept of house wine is prior to that we met when we were working at Marquis Wine Cellars, and we had a chance to work with all sorts of people, clients who were coming in because they had a lot of money, people who were just coming in because they wanted to buy a $10 bottle of wine to have a pizza. And I think what we found is regardless of the purpose, people were intimidated by wine. The person trying to entertain someone really informed that had $1,000 in their pocket just felt that they had to know something about wine because otherwise it wouldn't look good. And then the person who walked on the street wanting to buy a bottle of wine to cook a pizza, they were asking for Merlot or Chardonnay because that's all they knew. So we developed house wine really our purpose was to take away the pretense from wine and make it accessible to people. And we kind of developed all services to do that. Whether we were doing private tasting, word tasting, we wrote articles, we teach the Sommelier Programme, the WSET program. So regardless of what we did, we were really trying to make wine accessible for everyone. What else do we do, Michaela?
Well, one of the lesser known services that we offer at House Wine is cellar management, and along with that, hand in hand, is personal shopping. So essentially what we're doing is we're curating a collection for a number of private buyers, and we're tailoring it to their tastes. And that's anything from sourcing the wine for them to actually valuing it, organizing it in their cellar so that they can find it, and then giving a drinkability window so that they're actually going to be able to enjoy that wine when it's at its optimum drinking period. So I can guarantee you when we're working in someone's cellar, it's dark, it's humid, it's cold, we're not wearing our red dresses, we're fully bundled in sweaters and jeans, schlepping cases. Essentially it's like having a gardener come over, but rather than tending flowers, we're tending bottles. And so it kind of sounds a bit fancy, and Michelle was saying we're working a lot with people who had a lot of money to spend on wine. So when we talk about cellar management, it seems like, well, having a cellar must be just for the wealthy. But we're living proof that that's not the case, because both Michelle and I started collecting wine when we were students. And what was your upper limit for wine? Mine was probably 25 maybe for a bottle.
I think I was pushing it.
Exactly. That's when I wasn't going to be able to pay rent or eat or whatever. So we were able to buy wines at a really reasonable price, and we still have some of these wines in our cellar. So that brings us to our topic that we want to talk about tonight, and that is that you don't have to be rich to have a cellar, or the unofficial title is aging gracefully on a budget, which is something that both Michelle and I think about a lot these days, not just in terms of wine, but in terms of life in general.
No comments. So, what does it take to age? What do you need to age wine? Well, you know, just like people, some grapes just have better genes than others. Just think of Sean Connery, Catherine Hepburn, right? I don't know, I'm thinking about the actors, but you know what I mean. Jacques Clooney. Some people just have what it takes to age. And it's the same thing for grapes. So when you're out there, there's a few keys you can look for besides the grape. We're going to talk about famous regions. When we walk into people's cellar, they are kind of staples. If money is no object, people have heard of Burgundy, people have heard of Bordeaux. These are the kind of wine you are going to find in Sid's cellar, in most people's cellar. But there are other grapes and the other regions, lesser known, that you can keep in age. And so what does it take to age, Michaela?
Well, besides having good genes like Sean Connery or Catherine Hepburn, Catherine Deneuve, all of those people, there's a few things that we look for. One of them is great concentration of flavors. And I liken this to painting your wall, right? If you just put on one coat of paint, that paint job is not going to last very long. It's not going to look very good 6 months down the road. But if you put on a few coats of paint, you got a lot more concentration there. And that concentration will last the long haul. So you may not have to paint your walls for another couple of years, maybe even another 5 years, depending. The other thing that we look for are the pillars. Kind of like having your house, right? You need the beams to keep it standing. So this is what we call the structure of the wine. And one of the structural components of wine is the acidity. That mouth-watering sensation you get in your mouth, like I said, in your mouth, the acidity. But this will help for the wine to go for the long haul, depending on the grape variety. The other pillar is tannin. And tannin is the opposite of acidity. Essentially, it dries your mouth out. It's kind of like having tea that's been steeped too long. But the tannin is found in the skins, the pips, and the stems, and it acts as a preservative. And if you have enough concentration of flavor, then you can put your wine away, and the tannin is going to allow that wine to develop over time, maybe 5, 10, 15 years, and be beautiful at the end of it.
I was going to say just like you, but that's very cheesy, and people will think we're together, we're not, so I'm going to stop. So we're talking about the grapes who have the good genes. One of the first grapes that we think of right away is Cabernet Sauvignon. So why does Cabernet Sauvignon has the good gene? When you look at the grape is very small. Michaela was talking about where you find tannin. Cabernet Sauvignon has a very, very thick skin, and there's a lot of seeds within the grape. So that means when you make that wine, when you crush the grapes, there's not a lot of juice for the tannin. So that juice is going to leach out all of these tannins from the pips, from the skin, as well as the flavors in the color. So Cabernet Sauvignon, if you treat it well, of course, if you're going to make a bad wine, a 2-buck job, it's not going to last. But if you do make a good wine, you treat it well, Cabernet Sauvignon has all of the chances to keep well and age. And probably as a consumer, the most known wine that is a blend, and Cabernet Sauvignon play an important role, is Bordeaux. Right? Bordeaux is a region in France. There's a lot of different regions within Bordeaux sub-regions. And if you look at it in the wine lingo, we often refer to the left bank versus the right bank. So in Bordeaux, you have 5 different grapes, but the 2 most important players are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And the ones that I would say will last the longest are based on Cabernet Sauvignon from the left bank. Pauillac, Margaux, Saint-Estèphe, all of these wines that Sid was drinking today for lunch, right? will keep really well. The thing is, the world of wine is becoming more and more expensive. The Asian market is driving the prices, and Bordeaux has never been as expensive. Yes, you can still find some good Bordeaux around the $40 to $50 in good vintages that will last, but it's not what it used to be. So we're lucky when you're on a budget and you get to play with a lot of different wines that will last and don't cost the same price. For us, I think we've had a lot of experience with Cabernet Sauvignon from Australia. There's a producer you might have seen on the shelves before called Wins. Wins is a wine that at the time was like $20, now it's a big $30. But the producer worked in Vancouver many times, and we got lucky trying these wines going back to 1980s. And at the time, that person was buying that wine for $15. And what a great surprise, when you drink these wines, you just wish you had another case of it, right? The truth is, today, that wine is still costing $29. And I promise you that if you put it down and you drink it 15, 20 years on the road, you'll be surprised at how well it ages. Don't get, the French wines, like the French people, are a bit hard, right? When they're young, they're kind of hard. But the thing is, so when you try it, you think it does have to age. The Australian and the Californian cab or the Chilean cab kind of fool you because they have the tannic structure, but they're also very friendly. So when you drink a sip, like I don't need to age that, it's so delicious. Yes, it is, but if you age them, you'll be happily surprised. The other gem that we like to have in our cellar are Cabernet Sauvignon from Chile for the same reason. Cousineau Macule, who now sells for $19. I've done a lot of experiments with Cabernet Sauvignon that ages for a very long time, and we drink them and we enjoy them. And again, you don't need to be rich to have a wine cellar. These wines age gracefully and they're delicious. So two Cabernet Sauvignon if you don't want to splurge on Bordeaux. You know, these are delicious treats.
The other option is to just befriend Sid, and maybe he'll open some wines from his cellar for you as well, which we've done. He's been so generous. So Michelle has some cue cards for me because I don't actually have the memory that Sid Cross does. I can't remember, forget about the numbers. I just can't even remember the name of some of these grape varieties, so she's gonna help me along here. Michelle was talking about the classics in the wine cellar, but what we really love to do is go off the beaten track. And if you wanna find great wines at a really inexpensive price point, then you have to go to things that are perhaps less fashionable, lesser known, and generally they're going to be less expensive. But because you may not have heard of them before, it's hard to sort of get your footing and get started. We're just naming a few. There's plenty out there. So we're going to start with Tannat. These are some of our favorites. We're going to start with Tannat. That's your cue, Michelle. So we're going to start with Tannat. There we go. So just so that you remember these grapes. So Tannat is a grape variety that we find in the southwest of France. And particularly the association is with an appellation called Madiran. And Tannat, just as the name suggests, is very high in tannin. Right? And as I was saying earlier, tannin acts as sort of a preservative, as it were. So whenever you find a wine that's made from Tannat, or under its appellation name Madiran, which is also on the cue card, Michelle, if you go to the next one, it's going to have a lot of tannin, and in fact, in its youth, it actually is going to be quite grumpy. It's kind of like the French that Michelle was talking about, a bit hard at first, and it needs a long time to really develop a friendly disposition. But if you go to the liquor store, you can... Oh no, the French and the French Canadian are totally different. I know that. I learned that 10 years ago. So if you go to the liquor store, Chateau Montus, right, from Alain Brumont, $35. It's a 2006 vintage, so already has some age on it, but still has the bones to keep going. So that's our Tannat. We're going to go to the next grape, and we're going to visit one of our favorites, Mourvèdre. This is a grape we find in the southern Rhone Valley, the south of France, and it actually plays an important role in blends. It's similar to Cabernet Sauvignon in that it has that thick skin, and that's what gives the wine its color and its structure. So it's important in blends to give some longevity to the wine, some structure as well. If you want to find or try a Mourvèdre though on its own, go to the appellation of Bandol. I hope that's on there, yeah, wait. Bandol in the very far south of France. And you'll find here that Mourvèdre is playing the starring role. And Michelle and I like to call Mourvèdre the wild child, because in its youth, it can be quite animal, quite gamey, but with time it develops this really intriguing, savory, earthy note, and those tannins soften. And that's why we put wine away, because we want to enjoy the flavors that develop as it gets older. Next up, we have Aglianico. So we're going to Italy now, and we could name one of, or plenty of the many hundreds of grape varieties they have there, but Aglianico is one of our favorite. Well, it's spelled with a G, but you don't pronounce the G.
I'm telling them because most people say Aglianico, and you're saying it so well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Michelle. So Aglianico, sometimes people refer to Aglianico as the Nebbiolo of the South. So Nebbiolo is a grape you find in Piemonte, in Barolo, Barbaresco. Aglianico is grown in the region of Campania, and like Nebbiolo, it has those fierce tannin and that searing acidity. When you find an Aglianico that has enough meat on its bones, you can put it away in the cellar for 10 years, and that overt masculinity it may have had in its youth, again, it's softened, it becomes more polished, more elegant, and the wine so delicious to drink. Last, but definitely not least, and that's only last for tonight, go to Portugal. Go to Portugal. Michelle and I just did a tasting a couple of weeks ago, and we were amazed by the great value of wine we were finding in Portugal. But not only that, we found some wines that we wanted to put in our cellar, and most particularly some of the wines that are coming out of the Douro Valley. This is where we find port made. There's many different grape varieties there, so I didn't put any cue cards up for that, but they're really focusing on dry reds as well. And one of the wines we had was the Quinta do Casto Vieille Vin Reserve, $43, so it's not the $20 to $30, but still at $43, I'm buying some of that wine and I'm putting it in my cellar to see what happens to it in the next 5 to 10 years. Over to you, Michelle.
Will you share with me? So Michaela was talking a little bit about why you age wine, and the thing is, why cellar wine? It's just like a person, right? You kind of see that beautiful young teenager, and you can see the potential in them, but there's something about an older person who's kind of gained more complexity, and now they have a story to tell, right? And that's what the wine you're keeping in your cellar does for you. Just make sure you have plenty of wine to drink, and then you can have the patience to age the other. Most people, there's kind of two myths about aging wine. One of them is all wine can age, which is not true. If you have Beaujolais in your cellar, just make vinegar or cook with it, right? If it's like 10 years old, Beaujolais it's no good anymore, right? Not all wine can age, and the other myth is only red wine can age. That's not true either. There's a lot of fantastic, delicious white wine that can age. In fact, back in my days when I was a student, I was also a flight attendant on the side. And I was lucky because I was going to Germany a few times a month. And I was loving wine, but I was not working in wine yet. And I started to buy a lot of German Riesling because they were inexpensive. And that's all I could afford. Lucky me now, I have a lot of these wine in my cellar. I'm going to share with you why can Riesling age? Michaela has been talking about acidity, right? Riesling is a grape that has tremendous acidity. And David earlier was talking about how a grape, the job of a grape is to express a sense of place. And there are some grapes that are better at doing that than others, and Riesling is certainly one of them. Riesling, when you plant it at the right place, it just expresses a terroir. And when the Riesling is young, all you can see is this beautiful, bright acidity, lots of lime, lots of citrus. But if you do have the patience to age them, some of them for 20, 25 years, what you start tasting is beautiful mineral complexity that there's not a young wine that will ever give you that. They're very special. German Riesling, they're out to being tried, they're not popular. We're okay with it because it means that they're cheaper, but I think we have to spread the word out there that these wines, even though they're a bit dry, you don't have to be scared. If they've been speaking French too much, I cannot speak English anymore. Riesling, when they're just slightly dry, people are scared of that sweetness. The beauty of these wines is about the acidity, because the acidity keeps you refreshed and balances that slight sweetness of the wines that are just beautiful. And just to put in perspective, David was talking about Petrus selling for $2,500 a bottle on release. If you're lucky, because often it's more expensive than that. That's kind of the high end of Bordeaux. You can buy some of the best Riesling out there for $40, $50, $60 a bottle. And you're getting the very best from a single vineyard, from the best producer, and you can age that for 15, 20, 30 years. So just think of other wines out there you can age for that price, not many. Obviously, the other classic for white is Chardonnay. Anyone belonging to the ABC club here? Anything but Chardonnay? I see some not, yeah. A lot of people don't realize that Burgundy or white Burgundy is actually made from 100% Chardonnay. These are some of the classiest white wine in the world, no question. And they can age for a long time. And one of our favorites when you're on the budget is Chablis. Chablis is a little area north of Burgundy. When you go there, people are not very friendly, they warm up with time, the wine are the same. When you have them in their youth, they're really austere, really earthy, lots of acidity. I love it for sure, but the Premier Cru or the Grand Cru, the best wine, if you have the patience again, you can age them for such a long time. And they gain a bit of weight with time, they become a bit richer, more friendly, with beautiful roasted flavors, roasted nut flavors. And again, they show that beautiful minerality that the young Chablis will ever show you to the same extent. And again, you can buy your Premier Cru Chablis for $45, $50, a Grand Cru for $100. Compared to other top wines of the world, that's a pretty good deal if you're hoping to age that wine for that long. So if I don't buy Riesling, Chardonnay, Chablis, Burgundy, what do I buy?
So many other options, but I need some help from you. So why not start with Semillon? Semillon is a great variety that we see in the region of Bordeaux in France. And it's really what gives longevity to the sweet wines, the sauterne that they have there. But sauterne can set you back a little bit. So let's go all the way over to Australia, where Semillon has found a home, and particularly in the Hunter Valley, Australia. And these wines are so interesting, the Semillon that we've had from there, because in their youth, they're actually pretty neutral, pretty bland, with sometimes shrieking acidity, and not a lot more to recommend them. But we've sat down with a bunch of glasses in front of us, Semillon from different vintages, and you can see the color in the glass change. And when you taste the wines as they get older, they've really developed some complex flavors, like this wet wool, which kind of sounds weird, but it's totally delicious, I promise you. And sometimes it can become quite toasty, even if the wines have not been aged in oak. The other thing about Semillon is that, like most of us, it gains weight as it ages, and that's a good thing. It has some nice richness, and puts a little bit of meat on its bones, and balances out maybe that shrieking acidity, right? So Semillon has been, for me, one of the biggest surprises in my cellar. I forgot or lost a bottle of Peter Lehman Semillon in my cellar. It was $16 a bottle, not even from the Hunter Valley, but from Barossa Valley, not a place that we think of for aging Semillon. And it was 8 years old. And I thought, wow, it's totally done. I opened it up, it was so fresh, it still had so much life in it. I wish that I had bought a case just to enjoy it. $16, you can't go wrong with that. You lose it in your cellar, you're not going to forget it, or you will forget about that $15, right? So that's Semillon. I don't even know what's next in there. Chenin Blanc. So Sid made reference to Chenin Blanc that we have planted here in British Columbia. In terms of aging wines, Chenin Blanc is a great variety that we have a lot actually in our cellar. And the reference for us is the Loire Valley. Now the thing about France is that most wines are labeled by their appellation or region rather than the grape variety. So you may not see Chenin Blanc on the label, but what you want to look for, there we go, Savagnières, Montlouis, and one of our personal favorites, Vouvray. So these are the appellations, the regions that you want to look for in the label, but they're made from Chenin Blanc. And these were some of the first wines that Michelle and I started to collect when we were students. And Domaine Huet, in actual fact, was the reference. $20 a bottle for their dry Vouvray. And I still have 1997, 1998 in my cellar. And I love opening these up because when the cork is good anyway, they develop this really kind of honeyed mushroom quality that again you don't find in these younger wines. So for us, Chenin is a fantastic wine for aging. Maybe we can see how some of the BC wines compare, but we're not talking about BC right now. Last but definitely not least is Gruner Veltliner, or Groovy if you want to shorten it. And this was a discovery from Michelle and I. We were at a tasting together a number of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and it was a tasting of Gruner Veltliners, and it kept the Gruners kept getting older and older and older. We went all the way back to Michelle's birth year. Can I tell them what your birth year is? Is that appropriate? So they went all the way back to 1975. That's ancient. No, but it was still so youthful and beautiful, just like Michelle is. So what was so fantastic to see is to compare the younger wines that had that kind of citrusy, limey characteristic, and then try the older wines that had become really nutty, really mineral, really savory, and a lot like white Burgundy, and yet they were so much more affordable.
And they're growing it now in BC at Pumina.
Fantastic.
So just remember, wine doesn't have to be intimidating, and if you don't have that very thick wallet, you certainly can age wine. There's plenty of options out there, and hopefully you learn a few tips tonight. Thank you.